Google saved my life 8 years ago by helping me to understand that I had an inflammation problem. So, when I did a quick search on today's guest, Daniel Trevor, I learned that he had several successful companies and worked in the music industry. But having financial success, the one thing that we are all working hard towards, didn't protect him from having a heart attack. Daniel, please share with my audience why you ended up writing this book, The Unholy Trinity. Please subscribe.
Okay. Hey, well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it because I love talking about this stuff. And I loved your interview with Tony Hampton, Dr. Tony Hampton. He was wonderful, and you guys did a great job. A lot of really good information was relayed there. And I was on with him last year or about a year ago, something like that. And he's a great guy. A lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, right? Well, anyway, what happened was for me, I had passed a cardiac stress test with flying colors. I got a glowing bill of health, clean bill of health from my trusted physicians. And then I had a heart attack and almost died. It's like, what? And they missed four comorbidities due to inadequate or what I call conventional testing. And I'll tell you about the comorbidities. But anyway, so I tell people, thank me for not dying, researching everything in the book, and then ringing the alarm bells so as you don't go through what I went through, right? And I think of the book as three things. It's a how-to on how I researched and then stabilized and reversed four comorbidities. Like I said, I'll tell you about. It's also an expose on big food, big pharma, big medicine. And it's also what you would call a data evaluation and analysis of this. In 1930, the obesity rate in the United States was 1%. We are now approaching 50% in under a mere 100 years. Never in human history has a population gotten so fat and so sick so fast. You got to say, what the hell is happening or what? And when you pull the strings and do the analysis, you find out that it's the introduction in the 20th century of the refined carbs, sugar, oils in the amounts and concentrations we've never seen. So I go into all those things and plus a lot of other things throughout the book, and I just want to save people from not going through what I had to do because I almost bought the farm, as they say, and yeah, so I just want to get the word out on this, and that's why I'm happy that the book is doing so well and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's the long answer to your short question.
One of the things that I noticed, and I didn't read the whole book. I wanted to let you tell me what you wanted to tell me.
Sure.
But in the intro, what I think I noticed was that you use some words like diabesity, and you're talking about how obesity has actually changed, especially like Black community, Mexican community, and the food we're eating. I wanted to tie these things together, but can we start with what diet do you actually eat, and how did you get to the diet you're currently eating?
Well, I first found keto. After my heart attack, I just, since I've studied technical data all my life, I decided to take a dive into the science of how could this happen to me? I'm Mr. Healthy, right? And I was doing all the wrong things. But anyway, so I found keto because I went to Google University and YouTube University and PubMed and all these studies and books and everything. And I found great people like, Dr. Eric Berg and Ken Berry and, other people like that, Dr. Philip Ovadia and so forth. And, so I started with keto, and then I led myself to carnivore, and then I never made it to the lion diet. And I should probably distinguish that for your audience. Keto is, low carb, 50 grams of carbs or less, or as you call them, carbage. I love that, by the way. And then I was on with Ken Berry, and he calls it ketovore, where you're in the middle of keto and then carnivore, because carnivore is just animal products, eggs, beef, butter, cheese, salmon, that kind of thing. Whereas the lion diet, all the way over, that's just meat. Because lions, they don't eat eggs, they don't eat fish, right? They just eat meat. And so I'm more carnivore See, when I was doing keto, the more I removed the plants, number one, the better I felt. And number two, my labs look greater. And what more can you ask for? You feel better and your blood labs look getting better and better because after I had the heart attack, I started getting all the blood labs that I found out about. And because I wanted to have a benchmark of where I could measure my improvement in progress over the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, and that kind of thing. And so early on, I found one of these guys. His name was Dr. Ford Brewer, and he's taught thousands of doctors out of Johns Hopkins, right? And he was brilliant at all the testing. So he has a YouTube channel, very popular. And I reached out to him and I said, "Look, I'm writing this book," and I'm sure he rolled his eyes. Oh yeah, another one writing a book. And then I sent him some, and I asked him. I said, "Would you write a chapter in the book delineating what are the most important blood labs and scans that anyone can get online without needing a doctor's prescription? That way you yourself can find out if you got something lurking, ready to pounce, or you're just fine, or somewhere in the middle that you need to pay attention to, right?" And so he agreed. And so he wrote my chapter 22, Don't Guess, Test. Because, these days doctors they don't order the right tests because they don't know about them. They're not taught them. Now, I don't want to badmouth doctors because they've saved my life, right? So it's just that they don't learn certain things in their pharma funded medical schools. They want them reaching for the prescription pad in one hand and a scalpel or whatever their tool is in the other hand. And that's what they're taught, right? And so he wrote that, and there's so many tests that, I advised in the book. And because sometimes if you take it to your doctor, or you can check them out on my website, danieltrevor.com, and you can even buy them there. And I'm not selling anything. I tell people, look, this is not a money motivated mission for me. Write them down, take them to your doctor and say, "Look, I want this. Can you order this for me?" Because maybe you have insurance and that kind of thing. And your doctor, you got to be careful because your doctor might say, "Oh, you don't need that. You're fine. You don't need that. You're fine," in that area. And the only reason he's saying that is because he doesn't know what it is, wouldn't know how to analyze your results anyway. And the last thing doctors want to get from their patients is homework. They don't want homework, right? They're already busy enough. They got bosses that are, they want to keep the patients moving. They're, 7 to 10 minutes each visit. And, they got all this computer work to fill in. And I feel for them because they've got a lot to do. But anyway, just find out what the best tests are and what you must have, as opposed to the standard tests that the doctors usually order for you.
I think you just touched on something really important. That doctors are so time pressed because the hospital needs to make money that they don't
Exactly.
really ask us the right questions to actually find out what is the thing that they're trying to solve. And we are afraid to give them homework. So we're afraid to push that this is what's going on with me. And I know it's weird. I know it's different because I didn't have it 2 months ago. And doctors will try. I think doctors are well meaning. So I'm not trying to bash on doctors either.
Exactly.
They're in the same system that we're in. And I know that because I, in the hospitals, many of them are overweight. Many of them, you see them shaking like they're in the beginning of Parkinson's or something like. So I know that our doctors are overworked, not eating well, and in the same problem that we're in. But it is frustrating that, as you pointed out in the book, which I wrote 2 chapters, and
Okay.
I'm excited to read the rest because you've already said a few things that I'm like, wow, you can't be a little bit pregnant. So how can you be a little bit diabetic? And I'm just like, wow, never looked at it that way. This pre-diabetes foolishness, it's foolishness.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, no. I'm with you on all that. It's just, that's why the most important test, in fact, is chapter 7. I call it the most important health test you've never had, because doctors don't order it. See, what they normally do is they'll check fasting blood glucose and A1C. And if you just do those two, you're going to miss a lot of people. See, there was this shocking results of a study out of Johns Hopkins just a few years ago, and they found that 75% of doctors Now we're talking family physicians, internists, and cardiologists. 75% do not know how to properly diagnose prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? That's our biggest epidemic, because that leads to all the other diseases that we of modernity. And so what they do, again, they just do the fasting blood glucose and A1C, and they don't do this other one, because even the American Diabetes Association will tell you, hey, you're going to miss a lot of people if you only get those two. And not that I'm a big fan of American Diabetes Association or nothing, but uh, it's very true what they're saying there, because they don't do this other one called the OGTT with insulin, oral glucose tolerance test with insulin. Doctors don't order it. And that is the one that will detect where you are on the diabetic spectrum. Are you pre-diabetic? Are you normal? Are you full-blown type 2 diabetic? I mean, there's 1% of the population that can be on the slim side and still be a raging type 2 diabetic. That was me. I said, what? And because, I didn't know it, I didn't find out until I took this test. And I didn't believe it. So I took it again like a week later, and it confirmed it that I was off the charts diabetic. And it's just not a test that and I have that up on the website. You can read about all about that. And again, you can either order them there, just write it down, because these days you can go online and buy tests, blood tests, without needing a doctor's prescription. I think that one's like $89 or something, but that will confirm where you are in the diabetic spectrum, because having a diabetic physiology is the source root cause of heart attacks, strokes, certain cancers, diabetic neuropathy, which leads to amputations. And oh my God, the latest stats on that is in the United States, we're up to 438 a day on average. They're cutting off the toes and the feet, and it's just awful because it's so preventable, right? And you also have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, you get sleep apnea. A lot of different things can come from the insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia that we establish from eating the garbage that you so beautifully said. I love that quote. And the sugars and the seed oils and all that kind of thing. So yeah, you got to do the tests.
I'm curious to know something. You're in your N of one.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to solve your diabetes?
Oh, I would say probably I got it under control very quickly, because you can do that, because it all comes from you eat something. See, here's the thing, and you saw this already. I start getting into this. I'll answer that question. Just let me give you a heads up for your audience. On page 2 of chapter 1, I get into it right away. You have to understand the two most important fundamental players in the processing of the food you put in your mouth, and that's glucose, also known as blood sugar, and insulin. You eat something, your glucose goes up, the pancreas senses that, and it secretes insulin in order to bring it down, keep it in a safe range, and that's a normal process that goes on through life. But when you're eating the wrong foods that are incompatible with these humanoid bodies we've had for millions of years, and you're eating it too frequently, or both, your blood glucose and insulin are going to be elevated hour after hour, day after day. And very quickly, within a couple of weeks, you're going to develop hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance. And that's going to lead to prediabetes very quickly and type 2 diabetes. And so you really have to watch what you put in your mouth. We didn't have these kind of foods, even a century ago. I mean, sugar's been around a long time and that kind of thing. But let's see. It took me about 2.5 to 3 months to get my numbers down. But you really want to do this OGTT with insulin to find out where you are. You want to get some testing done to know your starting point. Okay, so what is it that I have to take care of, and what are my warning signals? Because remember, as you know, there are no signs or symptoms with these modern diseases. There's no check engine light or anything like that. It's just the only thing you can say is do you have a belly? Are you overweight or obese? You're there. And so to confirm it and to measure it with numbers, you get some testing done. and it's very, very important. So it took me about 2.5, 3 months to get down into pre-diabetes and then eliminate it totally.
I can't remember exactly which doctor it was that said you don't feel internally like we don't have internal pain receptors. So this idea that we would know we were sick, if it's an internal something, we don't know until the thing breaks. Like you knew because your heart stopped working. And most of us know because our pancreas or kidney or whatever just is not functional
Right.
and we're in the hospital. And I think that's the scariest, saddest, but most frustrating part of the story is that these scientists who create these ridiculous foods know that information. And
Oh
so it's kind
yeah.
of like this weird thing where I don't understand the thought process here. But in your book, the thing that I noticed that I'm a little bit confused about, I want you to explain to me, your Trinity is oil, so seed oils, carbs, and sugar. Even though carbs and sugar are the same thing, so why did we decide to split them?
Well, a lot of people look at it that way. They think of the grains, which are the carbs. They turn into, these grains, they refine them into these fine powders, and then they turn them into bread, pasta, cereal, biscuits, waffles, pancakes, tortillas, pizza crust, and all those. And those are very heavy carbohydrates. And those are more dangerous than even sometimes the sugars insofar as heart disease. But, the grains do turn into a form of sugar when you put them in your body. And the thing is that it's just these people, they back in the 80s, I don't know if you know this, but smoking was starting to go down. And the big tobacco companies, because people were listening to the Surgeon General, there's dangers, there's lung cancer, there's all this, and smoke, their stats were going down, right? And so they looked around and they said, okay, so where are we going to get our money from? They bought up the big food companies. They bought Kraft, Nabisco, General Foods, and so forth. And they brought their addiction scientists from big tobacco over to big food. And when I'm talking addiction science, we're not talking about people to get you unaddicted to something, but how do we get them to eat the whole bag instead of half the bag, or that kind of thing? It's more bottom line and profits than what's good for human beings, right? So right there, we've got like, it's all working against us. And you and I, when we walk into the supermarket, it's not a thought it's like you would just assume that if any of this food were not good for me, it wouldn't be for sale because, attorneys would get involved. But it's a slow degradation over a period of time that gets you addicted and they keep coming back. And then you'll put 2 bags of Doritos in your shopping cart instead of just one. And it goes on like that. And years ago, the snack aisle was like half of an aisle. Now it's 2 or 3 aisles with the cookies and the crackers and the ding dongs and the it's just insane. So people just it's very hard to get people unaddicted to that. But that is what I try to promote in the book. I said, look, you got to do it little by little, and you're looking for progress, not perfection. So what I tell people to do is look, list out what are the things that I can't live without. I just have to bring them into the house. It's this, or it could be much longer than that. Your next task is to find delicious but healthy substitutes for those things. And YouTube is a treasure trove of all those keto type recipes and that kind of thing. And you can change out. One of the things I did was I found I loved pizza, right? And then I found out how I could make an almond flour pizza instead of the grains, because the grains are really they're not good for human bodies. Let's just put it that. I have a whole chapter on that. Are you a wheat addict in chapter 10? Because they've only been around for like a mere 9 or 10,000 years. And we've been around a lot longer than that, and these bodies are just not ready for it yet. So they do so much damage and they're so addicting. Um, where did I go with this question? Did I answer your question yet? Or just, yeah, it's just
You
that these,
did, but I'll tell you, I was nervous in chapter 2 when you said that. Like switch out to these other, because in my community we talk about the fact that these things still get us because they're sweet, because almond flour is not good for you. But like I loved it when you turned it around and said, because you're not going to be there long. You're going to see how bad this stuff is and you're going to move forward. So as a transition, I totally agree with you. We need to transition.
Yeah,
And
we have to just
people
do a
eat
little.
almond flour anyways, almond milk, all the almond stupidities.
I know. Listen, I don't recommend doing, but if you're going to make a transition, do it little by little so it helps you get through it. Because if you're addicted to pizza, this is a way out of it. It may be a little bit hassle that have to go through it. And I was talking about this with Ken Berry on his show, and I was telling him that there's these when you go to the supermarket and you want to avoid the grain crust of the pizza, it'll say cauliflower pizza. I mean cauliflower crust, right? But what they do is they add. There's only four things that raise the blood sugar higher than wheat, and that's like what tapioca starch, corn flour, potato flour, and another one. And they add these. They take out the wheat and they add these in with the cauliflower. So it's like you really got to turn the package over and read the ingredients because if they have any of those, because the carbohydrates are going to be way out the roof and that kind of thing. And again, you're looking for a transition because soon your taste buds and your palate will change over a period of weeks, months, that kind of thing. Is it going to be a hassle to do it? Of course. But isn't being healthier and having all your blood labs in the right range and having a waistline like you were when you were 20, I mean, it's all worth it, right? So as your taste buds change, you just have to hang in there and make a gradual transition. Because I don't know anybody that could do it cold turkey and just go from, you know, the standard American diet, the sad diet, to keto. I mean, I couldn't do it, so I had to do it gradually, and that's what I did there.
And it's not advised. I had a conversation with Sally Norton, and she was talking about oxalate dumping. And so, like going straight from standard diet to carnivore, the potential for oxalate dumping or other toxin dumping, because oxalates aren't the only thing we can dump, becomes much higher. And it's it would be not advised. But I think when we're looking at our N of one scenarios, like it took me 5 years to decide to go from keto to carnivore. And I had heard about it before that.
Right.
So when I did my interview with Dr. Chafee, like I totally was convinced this is the right thing to do. And it still took me another, I think, year or so after that. So first of all, how long did it take you to make that turn to, like, how long were you keto before you transitioned over to carnivore? And what was the thing that motivated you? Because like for me, it was realizing that the more I removed little things, like the more I felt better.
Yeah. The same with me. It took me, I don't know, from keto, and then I went to what Ken Berry calls ketovore, which is removing more of the plants and that kind of thing. I mean, I still have some, let's say, some blueberries. Not a lot, but my chapter 23 is all about gut health, maximizing gut health, and I have this formula in there for this and this recipe for Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, and it does amazing things for your gut. And I'll put some berries in that. But now my taste buds have changed so much. If I just put a teaspoon of blueberries on my tongue and swish them around and just chew them up, I felt like I just had a Hershey's bar, right? So it's, my palate has changed so much. So I was on keto probably for like, 6 months to a year. And then the more I start, I'd watch, all our guys. I was on with Sean Baker and Tony Chafee and the rest of the gang, right? Tony. And the more because we have a community now, there's people you can relate to. This is what I did, like you're doing with me now. This is what Daniel went through. And then the more I started removing the plants from my diet, the better I felt and the better my labs looked. What more can you ask for, right? So again, my diet is just eggs, beef, butter, cheese, some salmon now and then, but I prefer the taste of beef, so I go in that direction.
And how long have you been total, like when was your heart attack, I guess is the big question. Like, and then when, and how long have you been?
Yeah, it's about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, and I haven't had um, that old diet for probably at least 4 years or so. So I made a major transition. The more I researched, the more I learned, and I experimented with myself. And I find people like you, and I hear what you're saying and what worked for you and that kind of thing. And because we have a lot of people, and then you read the show notes, and it's like, or all the comments, and you say, "Hey, I'm not alone. I ran into the same problem," kind of thing. So, yeah. And then when I did a total wheat and grain elimination, oh my God, my labs looked fantastic. My it was just incredible. I had some great gains there because see what people don't understand is this is the hardest one to do too. I think it was for me. Wheat raises the blood sugar higher than a Snickers candy bar. I didn't know that. I didn't know any of this stuff, right? And I was my Ken asked me. He says, "Hey Daniel, so what was your diet like before you had the heart attack? Were you sitting on the sofa eating Cheetos and Fritos and drinking Coca-Cola?" I said, "No, I knew enough not to do that." See, I was totally sold on the propaganda and the BS of heart healthy whole grains. I didn't know that these whole grains turn into sugar when you put them in your body and they raise your blood sugar sky high. I didn't know any of that. They're still not appropriate for human beings, even though we started eating them about 9,000 years ago. But anyway, yeah. So when I did that, my all my blood markers went. It's interesting. I moved about 3 years ago, and I thought, well, let me get a new cardiologist in this area because what I like to do is once a year I like to keep an eye on my ejection fraction. Anybody interested in heart disease or that kind of thing, it's very important. It's what that is your left ventricle has to push out the blood or pump the blood out at a certain force or velocity, and it's called ejection fraction. And it's got to reach your toes and your feet and your brain and or it's got to go everywhere, right? So you have to have it in optimal levels. The normal levels are between 50 and 65. And so I went to this cardiologist and I went in there. And I said, "Look, I just had my blood labs done. I don't need any of that. I just want to keep an eye on my rejection fraction, which I like to check once a year." He said, "Oh, okay." So, and first of all, I noticed he's got a belly, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, what kind of advice is this guy giving to his patients?" And then the first thing he asked me, he says, "Well, so how's your LDL?" And oh my God, I tried not to roll my eyes, but I said, "Okay, so, well, my LDL is out the roof. It's really high, but my HDL is in the 90s. My triglycerides are in the 30s, and I'm what you call a lean mass hyperresponder." And he's looking at me like I got two heads or something. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. And I didn't want to get into it because I knew he wasn't anywhere near that universe. But here you go. There's a cardiologist. He's got a lot of training. But so I just that's why I went there. I wanted to get the ejection fraction, which is very important for anybody that has some heavy heart disease. And I recommend anybody that's into that area because it's our biggest killer, right? Every 30 seconds, somebody dies of a heart attack. And like you said before, there's no symptoms to that. Check this stat, Violet. Over 60% of the people who die of a first deadly heart attack, their very first symptom, even having heart disease, is their own death. Are you kidding me? It's like, wow, there's no signs or symptoms. If you're having, heart palpitations or you're short of breath, you want to check that out right away because, you're about to make an exit. And it's not stage right or stage left. This is you're making an exit. So my chapter 17, 18, 19, and 20 is I dive deep into the heart disease things. So it's anybody interested in that.
I like that. I like the fact that you're pointing out that we're not going to know we're in trouble until we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned from Dr. Berry as well is that fructose. So the reason that we're not seeing that rise in blood sugar when we're eating chocolate, well, as much of a rise, when we're eating chocolate bars and stupidity, is because fructose doesn't actually raise our blood sugar and our insulin, like is not respond like so all of this stuff is like it's a separate something that again science knows, but people don't know. And I feel like that's the hardest thing here in this conversation you and I are having, is that because we've taken the time to fact check, like, so for me, it was, why was my hip hurting so bad? For you, it was, well, like, why, how the heck did I have a heart attack? And we took the time to go and find this information, but the doctors didn't give it to us. Like, over the 20 some odd years that I went to my doctor with joint pain, they never said, hey, what are you eating? Did you know that inflammation? And none of that conversation ever happened. You're rolling your eyes when the doctor's asking you about your LDL. And I think that the hard thing is that even though we have new research today, they're still not looking at the research. They're not looking at people's own um, comments on what they've done to lose the weight and get their diabetes under control, which we're told is not treated like you have it forever. Yet so many people have turned it around and are no longer showing diabetic numbers. So I want to know from you, like, what is the one thing that people who are going to read your book, because this is a great book, but our doctors aren't reading this book. How do we have a conversation with our doctors about what you're sharing today? How did
Well,
you do it?
well, here's the thing. Let me go off. Let me answer that question in a roundabout way. There was a study called the ischemia trial, and it was this large $100 million government funded study, and it involved almost 5,200 patients. Well, it's 5,179 patients. Two groups. One group, they gave them invasive procedures like CABG, which is coronary artery bypass graft. That's just basically open heart surgery, right, with the bypass. Or they gave them PCI, which is percutaneous coronary intervention, when that means one or more stents. So here you got the one group that invasive procedures, and the other group, they sent them in the direction of lifestyle changes. Drop 30 pounds, get back to the gym, stop eating Cheetos, and all that kind of stuff. And they followed them closely for 4 years. And at the end of the 4 years, it was a failure, because what they wanted to do, they wanted to prove that these invasive procedures, they were the way to go, because that's where all the money is, right? There's no money in diet and exercise. And so, and so they even said, the ischemia trial failed to show that these invasive procedures were any good at preventing heart attacks and strokes. And so, now, to be clear, they can be, life-saving interventions if the person's actually having a heart attack or there's some emergency in the hospital. But that's only 15% of the time. The other 85% of the time, they're done for prevention. And these studies clearly showed that they don't work for prevention. There was another one, the Courage trial, the Orbita trial, and these studies, they rocked the cardiology community. And so, you would think that the doing of all of these invasive procedures, the graph would start to go down, or at least slow down. It's out the roof. There's more now done than ever before. And because here's the thing, there's so much money involved. There's no way that the CEO and the board of directors of the hospital is going to want to see all that disappear, because if that happens, institutions and careers would disappear for these, the people that are doing the stents and the heart attack. They would, there goes the beach house and their mountain retreat and the kids in Ivy League and the high-end Mercedes down to a Kia or something. It would all change, would all disappear. I mean, that's how they buy the they fund the extension or the new unit on the hospital. It's just so much money involved, And so I tell the reader in the book, I say, look, if your cardiologist is telling you, I think we should put in a stent, that kind of thing. And I say, look, show him these studies, then he'll know that you know the truth. And then I ask him, explain to me again why you think I should do this, whether it's the bypass graft or the stents, that kind of thing. Because you have to get this information on your own. Because, look, people just think they see the white jacket, knows all, sees all. And it's wrong. They're not taught this information in their pharma funded medical schools.
And the bigger thing that I'm going to add to this is that those beach houses and fast cars and all the things that they are being bribed with, because their salary is a bribe. And I think that's the bigger thing that we don't, like, a lot of people don't get. We pull the doctors into this story, even though doctors get stents, doctors get these graphs. Like, I remember watching a low carb down under panel where the guy in the audience was asking the doctors on the panel if he could stop taking his statins. He was that terrified that he was going to die if he stopped taking the statins. He wanted them to explain it better so he could understand. So I think the other thing that I'm going to point out here is that these failed trials were successes for the people if we had been told about the damn studies, right? If
Yes.
they would have told us that actually changing your health would do something, we would probably do it. But here's the thing, they want us eating the crap. So and this is not doctors. This is the up of the up of the up in all of the system
You are
want us
so
eating the crap, right? And because if we're eating the crap, then they can keep making new procedures and new medications and new stupidities to make money. And this is where we need to see that it's a lie that we can't change the way we eat. That's the biggest lie in all of this. The way that they get us is they tell people, oh, you have a stent or you have your graft, your life is going to be okay now. And what does that person leave and do? Continue to eat the stupid foods that caused the problem in the first place. Those people that got the health talk were actually given real data on how to improve their health. Now, did they stick to it? Were they actually made aware that their eating pattern was a compulsion, that they didn't have actual control of what they were doing? Or were they just led to believe that they can do it for a short time until the study was over and get back to their normal life, which is often what we're told.
exactly. You're so smart because it's really a shame because it really is the upper levels. It's like they think of us as an ant farm, I think. And by the way, these studies, that's in chapter 17. And then chapter 18, I cover statins because statins can give you a lot of side effects, body aches and pains. You get kind of stupid because you lose some IQ points, road rage. There's a lot of really bad effects. And there's one study there's several that I cover in that chapter, but there's this one I should tell you and your audience about. There was a big study. See, people want to know how much longer will I live if I take a statin every day for the rest of my life. So the researchers thought, yeah, let's find out. So they dove in. It was 92,135 patients, two groups. The group taking statins for primary prevention, in other words, no heart attack yet. They're just taking it because their doctor said something goofy and wrong about LDL or whatever, or total cholesterol. They lived a big 3 days longer than those in the other group not taking a statin. Those in the second group who were taking statins for secondary prevention, in other words, they already had a heart attack, they lived a big 4 days longer. So if that's all you're going to get, I asked the reader in the book, I say, look, you still want to put up with all the nasty side effects from taking statins, or you just want to say, here's 3 days. Take my 3 days. I'm not doing right. And they proved it right there. And then also they found that people taking statins, they have a 45% higher chance of getting diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So it's like wild. I mean, I've even spoken to guys at the gym. I mean, I don't promote this stuff at the gym, but I talk to them and they'd say, oh, well, if we do get on diet and that kind of thing, they say, oh, I'm on a statin, so I can eat anything I want. It's like, what? They think they're protected because they're taking a statin. They just don't know. It's just so sad.
But I don't think it's just that they think that. The unfortunate wording of many doctors is that you're on a statin and you're good now, which does give us the impression that, oh, I can go back to living my life the way that I was living it before.
I know. It's just it's such a shame because again, you got the white jacket, knows all, sees all, and there you go. Well, the doctor says, and there you get pressure from the family too. Look, the doctor said you should get a stent. You got to go into the cath lab and uh, and you get pressure that way too. So I can understand that people go under for that kind of thing, but it's just to get this information out there, and that's why I love your channel so much. You are really enlightening people to the proper human diet, as our friend Dr. Ken Berry says.
I want to know, and maybe you can help give me a definition of this for my community. You said the word earlier, modernity.
Oh, modern times.
Oh, just modern times. Okay, I wasn't
Yeah,
sure what that meant.
yeah, these foods of modernity, because we never had these 100 years ago. I mean, let's face it. Let's 1900 and prior, people died of infectious diseases, whether it was tuberculosis, influenza, gastrointestinal things. Because we didn't have refrigeration, we might have eaten something nasty, and it took us out that way. And after, let's see, Hershey's made their first candy bar in 1900. I'm thinking, what a way to start a century. All right. And then there was Jelly Rolls, and, all the rest of them came after that. And the seed oils, they were considered toxic wastes. They were made from cottonseed oil, or they made cottonseed from the cottonseed farming. They made them from other different types of plants. And they were used in the Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s, early 1900s as machine lubricant, motor oil, right? And then these two guys from Europe came over and they looked at a bucket of it and they'd say, hey, it looks like lard or tallow, which is what people cooked with, right? They got the great idea. Why don't we package it, sell it to people, make some money? So in 1911, these two guys, William Proctor and James Gamble, Procter and Gamble, they came up with this product called Crisco, and to help with cooking and that kind of thing. And it was flying off the shelves in 1911. And Crisco, we didn't discover until 90 years later, contains more trans fats in it than any other product you can put in your mouth. And those are the most dangerous fats that you can put in your body, especially for your heart. And wouldn't you know, in 1912, a year later, after the Crisco was flying off the shelves, we had our first medically recorded heart attack. And then by 1945, heart disease was the biggest killer, and cancer wasn't even like a thing, as they say, until the 30s. And now they're two, our biggest killers, heart disease and cancer. And it just exacerbated after that. It just got worse and worse. So,
Wow,
yeah.
I did not know that connection between Crisco and the first heart attack. Like, I mean, it's not
Yes.
a direct correction, but I mean, it's a very big coincidence.
Yeah, it's date coincident with that. It's like, well, you can put those together yourself and that kind of thing, because there is a phrase that is unfortunately, it's a business model for some, and that is a cured patient is a lost customer. Now, as sad as that sounds, there was, I think I covered this in chapter 8, Goldman Sachs, the international banker. They had one of their analysts do a white paper on, it was for their pharma biotech companies, and it was about creating cures is not good for the bottom line, not good for, and the example that they gave was there was this big pharma company called Gilead Sciences, and they came up with this product called Harvoni, and it had a 96 to 99% cure rate for hepatitis C. And so within a couple of years, when it first came out, it was like $12 billion or something. Within a couple of years, it was down 75%. It kept going down after that. And Goldman Sachs yelled at them and said, look, we don't want you to do that. What they would rather have had them do is create a pill that the patient could take once a day, twice a day for the rest of their life, or an injection or infusion once a week, once a month for the rest of their life, so that the profit model goes throughout the entire lifetime of the patient. We don't want cures. It's not good for the shareholders. And that same mentality goes over to, big food, I'm sure, because they have shareholders.
And what's
And
really frustrating is this idea that they think that people won't need doctors. If we're too healthy, we won't need doctors. If we're too healthy, we won't need. First of all, There will always be people who are going to eat junk. The same way that we've known for years. Alcohol is a toxin. Full stop. There's no getting around it. It's messing with your brain. It's ruining your liver. It's like, it's just a talk. Do people drink? Absolutely. So, like, the idea that we will just never need doctors, that's ridiculous.
Right.
I do think that even with everything that's being screamed about down in the US about the new food pyramid and all the stuff that RFK is trying to do, people are still going to buy chips and chocolate bars and cookies and ice cream, and they're not going to stop buying these things. So that's the first thing. It's like we need to understand that this model that says we need to keep people sick so that we can make the maximum money is ridiculous, because we could flip that on its head. How about actually figuring out how that we can have enough animals to feed everybody? Why aren't we investing in that? Right? To make sure that the animal and well-raised animals that don't have disease themselves, because if we eat disease, right? So like raising them in a proper way so that we can actually thrive than just eking by on this processed nonsense that we're constantly being, like the amount of garbage that the average person eats, or if I talk about myself, 450 grams. Before I started my keto diet, I actually checked, and that was me on a day being good, like no chocolate bars, 450 grams of carbohydrate, just like from eating real food.
Yeah.
We don't understand the level of carbohydrate in the stuff we're eating.
Well, speaking of that, there's this book. It's 1,600 pages long. It comes out every couple of years. I can't remember the name of it. It's 190 different nutrition experts. And there's a section that shows the essential, there's about 50 or 60 items listing out the essential ingredients and chemicals that are needed in a human diet. And then at the bottom of it, I put, do you notice the complete absence of carbohydrates? They're not needed at all. And then even the U.S. National Academy of Science, which is top place organization for science in the United States, even they say there is no need. The need for carbohydrates for humans is zero, provided they get enough fat and protein. Because if they do that, the body has this. It happens in the liver. They have this thing called gluconeogenesis, glucose, sugar, new, genesis, birth of or beginning, where it can create, we don't want to get hypoglycemic because that's too low sugar. So if we need some, it'll create it itself, provided we have enough protein and fat. But the need for carbohydrates, I mean, I tell you, look, you may have heard of essential amino acids, that's your protein, essential fatty acids, that's your fats. There's no such thing as essential carbohydrates. They just, we don't need them, these humanoid bodies that we have. So, and when I was on with, your friend Anthony Chafee, he was telling me about this. When he was in UK for a conference, and he's a neurosurgeon, so he knows a lot about this area. And he heard a guy say on stage, he says, "Look, I don't want less heart disease. That's how I make my money." I said, he said that out loud. He said, yeah. He says, yeah, it's kind of ghoulish. Some of these doctors, they just don't care about the patients as much as their own bottom line profits. And it's a shame that way. And with regard to the meat, my chapter 12 is eat meat and help the planet. So I go into that whole thing too. So that's, how we can get more animals and get rid of the CAFOs, CAFO. That's concentrated animal feeding operations. And that's where they have these poor animals in these stalls that are so tiny they can't even turn around. And they're feeding them, they're injecting them with hormones and antibiotics, and they're psych drugging them into a silent acquiescence, and they're just there for their entire lives, just eating these grains that are just filled with glyphosate and everything, like you were just saying. They're fed all these bad things. So we got to get rid of those and transfer over to what's called regenerative agriculture, which I cover in that one too, because it's just bad news. And we have plenty of use for that.
I think that the planet, we're not caring enough about the planet we're living. That's a whole other conversation. But if we were actually understanding the cycle that we're part of, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. And I think that's another problem that we have, is that we're so far away from our food. Like, I've met people who won't like touch raw meat with their hands. They have to put gloves on it. And it's like, to me, it's just, I don't understand, how are you so repulsed by the food that you eat, right? If someone else makes it, they're fine to eat it, but they can't. So I feel like we've been taught in our world to find real food disgusting, and to find, like, these stupidity things that we buy, as I like to think that that's real food, right? We want everything convenient, which is scary. It's scary because the more convenient it is, it means that the more processing went into it. It means that less that it's actually feeding our body, which I think is another thing that people don't think about. As you said, 10,000 years ago, were we eating this way? And we weren't. And if we are waiting for our bodies to get used to eating toxins, I think we're going to be waiting for a very long time, like maybe forever, because it doesn't make sense that our body would get used to eating a toxin when real food is around, right? And
Ex-
we actually have access to it. We eat it sometimes. So our body is probably just confused, like, why do you keep giving me this stuff when there's this stuff available?
yeah, exactly. I think people don't, they're very short sighted. They don't think about history going out, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, hundreds of thousands of years. They don't think about that at all. And I like how Ken says, we have been eating meat for as long as we've been breathing air, drinking water, and playing in the sunshine, right? And I get into all that in chapter 3. It's called "We're Built for a Higher Protein and Fat, Low Carb Diet." That's how we were built. That's how we ate over eons of time. And it's so, people are so short sighted because the availability of the food is so ubiquitous. You have these, I mean, 50 years ago, we didn't have all these fast food places on every corner. There wasn't, there weren't Starbucks where you get something that has 1,200 calories and a lot of carbs and sugar in it. Um, these drinks that they're imbibing, we just didn't have all that. And back then, if you look at, if you see photos of people on the beach, let's say 50 years ago, they're all slender. Now it's like, forget about it. Because we ate breakfast, we ate lunch, we ate dinner, and that was it. Snacking wasn't even like a thing, as they say. And it's just the amount of food we're taking into it, because if people have breakfast, and then before lunch, between that period, they'll have, snack or two. And then in the afternoon, they have a snack or two. And then in the evening, they got, so it's just the amount of food is just, there was a, Washington Post had a headline and it said that it was something like, the modern woman now weighs as much as the 1960s man. In 1960s, the men were about 162 pounds. The women these days are clocking in at 162 pounds, and the men are already and are way up from 162 to 195. So it's like, what's happening here? So it's just, especially in the last 50 years, it's gotten real bad, only because the commercialization, and they make it so addicting, and it's very difficult for people. I mean, I don't blame people who are addicted. It's just how the food is created. You have these biochemical geniuses and PhDs in the big food, labs and conference rooms around the world. They're trying to figure out, okay, so what ingredients can we put in that we can addict the person so they eat more of it? And it's so sad. And until people get this knowledge, that's why I love what you're doing. You're really making people aware of, the proper human diet, and getting them away from these toxic foods.
Honestly, I feel like the other thing that you just said, that I'm going to take it to another step, is like, we go to restaurants, and I've been to a US restaurant. So I live in Canada. And when we go to the US, the size of the meals down there is like, holy cow. Compared to like what we get up here in Canada, like night and day, like the ginormous
It's
Size of,
true. It's true.
and this is the thing that's really unfortunate is that we learn from each other, right? So if I see somebody eat something and they seem okay, it's telling me it's okay to eat. And so whether it's a gigantic mountain of food at a restaurant, whether it's a bunch of junk food, but the scariest part right now is that before I can even make my own decision, they're getting us to do it to our kids, right?
Oh,
Like we give our babies the first thing that well, here in Canada, the first thing you're told to give your kid is that baby oatmeal and bananas. We're starting the kid off on carbohydrate right away, out the gate, carbohydrate. And then we are pushing the fruit. So I do feel like our whole setup is towards make sure that they're compelled, make sure that they just can't not eat it, make sure that it's in their eyes all the time. And if you're a baby, you don't until you're like maybe if you're lucky at 14, you can control your food because most parents like what I make for supper is what I make for supper. What I give you for snacks is what I give you for snack. So like if you have parents that are a bit more loose, maybe you can, but by the time you're at that age, you're already fully in it. You're already fully compelled to eat the high sugar thing. And that's the biggest frustration for me is that we don't even see like in our medical system right now, the children's hospital is full of kids with leukemia, with obesity related issues, with like internal metabolic issues. They are under the age of 15. How are we not seeing the problem?
wow. Well, that's like I said, having channels like yours and having your audience just share these types of this type of information with people, they can start to wake up a little bit because it's just people have been fooled. There's Mark Twain, who was a common sense philosopher of the 1800s. He said one of his quotes. He's got a lot of great quotes. He said, um, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. It's easier to fool people than to convince them, hey, pal, you've been fooled." And because, hey, my doctor says this, and my other guy, the guy at the gym, he says I got to do this to put on more muscle. And, it's just they're getting all the wrong information. So that's why I really took the dive. And I don't know if you know, but my book has more scientific citations than any other health and wellness book out there. And I tell the reader in the beginning, I say, look, I know some of you might be thinking, well, you're not a doctor. Why the hell should I trust you? I say, don't. Just think of me as a friendly relay point of what the best of 21st century science has to offer for your health and wellness. And fix yourself. I did. You can too.
I absolutely love that because I think one of the most important things we need to do is realize that they've taught us to be attached to the idea that we're smart, even though smart people are always asking questions. Like if we could learn to lead with curiosity, we would actually improve our understanding of the world and then turn around and use that information. So when you get data, so I eat something, my body does something, use the data that your body is giving you and then talk to your doctor about it. Make sure that your doctor is aware that, hey, I did what you asked me to do. This was the result. And don't just take, well, that's impossible, which I've had doctors tell me, by the way. Taking a medication that I was given had a negative outcome. Oh, that's not one of the listed things. I don't care if it's one of the listed things that happened to me, right? But like this is what the kind of stuff that you're told. If it's not on the list that they have, that it couldn't have been from this thing. So we need to learn to use the data and then react according to what our body is telling us. And I want to know, like for you, again, like you have so much research that you have touched and like you've pulled into the book, and of course it takes you somewhere. And I'm wondering, like, is there one piece of research that where you found it and you were just like if people just knew this.
Oh my God, I had so many of those, Violet. Even the whole thing with the wheat raises the blood sugar higher than a Snickers bar. I mean, that's like, nobody knows that. And when I found that, I was like, whoa. So and then I kept connecting the dots. So it was a total mind blower. And I got to a point where I said, I need to share this with my fellow humanoids so they can not have a heart attack, not get Alzheimer's, not have all these diseases of modern life that were never in existence prior to about 100 years ago, right? And so a lot of it just really blew my mind. And it's what happens is the doctors, they go along with what they call scientific consensus. And no progress in science is ever done by consensus. It's just, it's usually one guy that figures out something, like if it's Thomas Edison or this particular doctor, and they share it with the world. But it takes a while. But, oh my God. One example I wanted to give there was that, for example, in 1633, our brilliant astronomer, Galileo, he discovered that the Earth was not center of the universe, was not the center of the universe, but it evolved around the sun, and the sun is in a system that's going around these other systems. And he was imprisoned for life because it was scientific consensus that the Earth was the center of the universe. And he was in prison for life because of that, because it went, the Catholic Church was very powerful back then, and they didn't want to, that was one of their big beliefs. And so you can't go with scientific consensus. So I tell people, I said, look, the next time you're hearing about scientific consensus, whether it's coming from government or media, just know that what you're about to hear will be as truthful as the COVID jab is safe and effective for everyone, and it totally stops transmission. And we know what a big bunch of bullshit that turned out to be, right? 6 feet and all that. It was just a criminal activity that took place a few years ago. So anyway, that's my thought there.
And for me, like I've lived that because my joint pain, which every doctor told me had to do with either the sports I was doing, I wish I was that sporty, had to do with the weight that I was carrying. I lost my joint pain before I was at goal weight. Told
Wow.
me it was like there were so many things that they told me that it was related to. And then when I finally made the connection that wow, my joints hurt when I eat nightshades, any kind of nightshade vegetable, whether it's a tomato to eggplant, I will have joint pain. That's impossible, they said. So the consensus is that can't be the answer.
I've got to know, well, that those things are turning on your inflammation, and the inflammation is leading to the pain and the osteoarthritis. And I have a whole chapter on osteopenia, osteoporosis, and other bone issues in chapter 13. But anyway, I cover a lot of stuff in the book because it's all because of the standard American diet that's being pushed on everybody. And by the way, my other comorbidity was, besides being a raging type 2 diabetic, which led to my heart disease, I also had NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because I don't drink, no drugs. I'm already silly enough, as my daughters will surely attest. And, and that was from the high fructose corn syrup that I was getting. And I didn't know anything about that. See, every morning I would start with a big bowl of granola, and it had to have probably 60, 70 grams of carbohydrates right there with high fructose corn syrup. And I didn't know that, the body can't metabolize, none of the cells can metabolize high fructose corn syrup. So it all goes to the liver and it builds up fatty there. And it gets into, you get into danger. And what happened was with me, and I found this out. There was a guy named Ivor Cummins. I don't know if you know him. I found him, I don't know, several years ago, has a YouTube channel. And he had what I had. He had this elevated GGT. It's one of the liver enzymes. There's ALT, ASP, ALP, and then there's GGT, which is the most important one, and doctors don't check for it. GGT is gamma glutamyl transferase. Why is that important? Life insurance companies, they have to know who to accept and who to reject, right? And their number one predictor of all-cause mortality is having elevated GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase, right? And mine was, it's supposed to be 65 or under. Mine was 265. It was like, what? And so I was in serious trouble that way. And then I found another study that said if you have elevated GGT like I did, the usual cause of death is a heart attack. So man, oh man, I'm connecting all these dots. It's like, whoa. So And again, it's none of it's Daniel's opinion. It's all these studies that I found. And I made sure that I didn't pay any attention to the studies that had funding from big food, big pharma, big medicine, that kind of thing. So, and then the other one was the osteoporosis, because they're finding, in fact, the first study I cover in that chapter, they're finding that the bone issues are descending lower to like 35. And that's because of the onslaught of you know, the diabetic causing foods that they're forcing on us, the standard American diet, and the unholy trinity, because it's deteriorating the bones and that kind of thing. And so I had those are my four. I had the type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, osteoporosis, and the heart disease. And again, making this transformation, I was able to stabilize, then reverse all of them.
And all of them caused by a diet, which is the part that's so scary.
Yes, we didn't
And
have
I'm going
these
to add to what you,
diseases.
yeah, exactly. And I want to add to this that high fructose corn syrup, which can be anything from 20% glucose, 80% fructose, all the way to 50-50 glucose. Actually, I think you can even have 40% fructose, but whatever. Usually it's coming in around 50-50, which guess what, is exactly the same as table sugar. We have all in the news screaming, yelling about, stay away from high fructose corn syrup, and people are sprinkling table sugar in their coffee, putting it on their bland cereal. I used to do that. I'll put my hand up for that one. Like all the things that we do with table sugar, not
Yeah.
realizing that it's ruining everything.
No, you're right. I mean, but why can't I eat my Cheerios? It says on the front, approved by the American Heart Association, right? It's like, oh, Procter and Gamble, by the way, in the early days, I think it was in the 40s, they made a contribution to the American Heart Association. They were just starting up. It was equivalent to about $40 million today. So they're hand in hand there. If it's all over the place, the collusion that these people are up to. So anyway, it's just, but it says so on the body, on the bottle, or on the box, heart healthy. Right?
Yeah, they have us convinced. And it's
Absolutely.
scary how well we've been trained to just believe what's written on these packagings, even though like I used to think, and I do think I knew that the 2 scoops of raisin idea, like, like, okay, is it really 2 scoops? Okay. But I truly did believe that heart healthy check. Like I really used to believe that that meant something. To find out that it's a paid for something,
I know
such
it's
a
easier to
mind
fool.
blowing.
It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. Right? Mark Twain was so right on it. And I love this other quote by cardiologist Dr. William Davis, who spent decades in the healthcare system. He said this was his book back about 6, 7 years ago. It was called Undoctored. Subtitle: Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor. I recommend it to anybody. He's got a quote in there. I think it's chapter 1 that I stole and I put it in my book somewhere, but I gave him proper attribution, of course. And he said, was it hamburger contains no ham, there are no grapes or nuts in grape nuts, and health does not come from healthcare. So I just love that quote. So, and he would know because he was an interventional cardiologist and he would do 6 stents a day and make 10 grand a day, that kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, like that.
I think the other thing that's very frustrating to me when we're looking at all of this stuff is that it's complicated, right? Like all the medical stuff, you kind of need to be able to understand certain level of biology, chemistry, whatever, to really fully understand it. But I feel like they use the fact that it's complicated to talk about it in an even more complicated way to make sure that the average person can't follow. And then they do this really sneaky thing of siloing all the different. So my skin doctor didn't seem to see the connection with my hip issue, and like my general doctor didn't see the connection with my headaches and the tinnitus, right? And like so my ear, nose, and throat doctor, and heaven for like the sleep apnea doctor didn't see. All of these different doctors that I'm going to all at the same time, none of them seeing the connection to what's going on. Or are they not seeing it? Are they not allowed to talk about it? Again, this whole system that we have set up to make sure that we maximize the money made from the
Yeah.
sick person.
It's
Because I
just,
was
it's,
spending lots of money.
no, I get it. Listen, we all are. If we're not doing our insurance, we're going beyond our insurance, and because we want to be better. We all want to be better. And it's just such a shame because, ah, oh my God, the higher your A1C, they also discovered, is the more your brain shrinks on an annual basis. So that's why, the more you got high A1C, I cover that in the book too. I forget which chapter that in, but that's in. But they discovered that it's call it hippocampal atrophy, and it just starts shrinking on an annual basis. The higher your A1C is, so that's if that's not it. I mean, losing your brain and your ability to think and so forth, and bringing on Alzheimer's and that kind of thing is just something you really want to, because we're living longer because we have all these drugs and so forth, but we're living sicker. It's just there's this longer lifespan, shorter health span is what we're looking at there, and it's just such a sad situation because we're just not taught this, and that's why I made the an audio book, because a lot of people, they don't read. And so I thought, okay, well, let me make an audio book. That way they can hear it. Maybe they'll hear it better. That way they go, oh, okay, let me rewind that and play that again. Right? Because some people just don't read. Say, look, this book can change your life, or listen to this. So that's why it was important for me to do an audio book as well. So whatever floats your boat, uh, check it out.
What's really also good to know, because a lot of people don't know this, is we're often told that there are certain parts of our body that can't regenerate, which I've recently found out is just not even reality. And I can't remember which doctor said it right now, but the thing that's important to me is that our entire body regenerates in about 20 years ish. So we actually do have the ability to undo some of these things that we've been doing, inadvertently doing, because we weren't doing it on purpose. Heaven forbid, I would have never have eaten the way that I was eating if I knew what was happening with my body. But the great part is understanding that even if your A1C is high and your brain is being impacted or plaquing is forming or whatever, stick with the good diet and let your body rebuild itself, because that's what it does. And I think this is the worst part about everything. Like, we are made to believe that if our body is broken, it's broken forever, which no, we have the ability to heal if we give ourselves enough time and eat the right thing. And then if we heal, our body gets back to healthy weight, because a healthy body regulates its weight. That's what it does. It's what it's built to do. It knows what we're supposed to be at. It's built to rebuild, it's built to repair and get itself back to the right weight.
Exactly. It's an ancestral diet, which was, again, it's a higher protein and fat and low carbohydrate. That's how we ate for millions of years. Anthropologists and bioarchaeologists have told us that we've been eating meat for at least 2.6 to 4.5 million years. I think it's a lot longer, but I'll take it if that's what they're saying. And all these new foods, we've never had them before. So it's just incredible that people just don't get this information. It's not taught in the schools. Their parents, they're all fat, sick, and addicted too. They don't know anything about anything, just like me. I was in the dark, and I'm sure there was a time where you were in the dark too, right? So, and then you found, what was it? Who did you find that made an impression on you, and you got some information that, hey, I need to fix myself, and I'm going in this direction. I like what this guy's saying because it makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to tell you who it was, but you just said something that just clicked the light bulb in my head.
Okay.
You said that we've been eating this way for 2.6 million years.
2.6 million to 4.5 we've been eating meat. That's what they can prove. I think it's a lot
Okay,
longer, but I'll take that.
thank you. Because if that's what we were doing, that means that before that, we were eating plants and it wasn't working. We've already adapted.
I don't know about that. I can't address that? I don't know if we were. I
I'm
know
I,
that as
that's where
hunter
my
gat.
brain that's where my brain is going. That's where my brain is going.
Well, we did eat some plants, but only when they were available and in season, which wasn't all the time, right? We are basically our diet consisted of what we could catch, kill, and eat, because that's what And then what we for 2 or 3 weeks out of the year, we might have some berries, and we would get we would the berries would come around, and we found the berries, and we'd go tell Uncle Throgmagog and say, hey, there's berries, and we'd all go eat berries for as much as we could. But that was
Right.
just
So what that makes me think is that what they're saying is that prior to that though, like before we started eating more animal matter, what would we have been eating if they think we've only been eating animal matter for 4 million years? Then
well,
before that, what
I
would we have
think
been
what
eating?
part of what they were saying is that the 4.5 million is that's how long we've been around.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think it's longer, but they're just saying that at least 2.6, that kind of thing. So that's a long time. And when you think in terms of like 2,000, 10,000 years, that's like a snap of the finger in the eons of time when you compare it that way. And these bodies just haven't adapted. I mean, even Dr. Ken Berry brought up the fact that there's this thing called um, species adaptation hypothesis, where when a certain species of animal is used to eating a certain way for a long damn time, that becomes their natural food. Because he was even giving an example. He says, Daniel, if there was a study saying that, I have 70 sheep in my pasture, because he's got a farm and everything. He says, well, we came up with this new food. Purina came up with it, got a patent on it. And this is the way to feed them. They don't need to eat the grass and the weeds. And people go, what? That doesn't make any sense. And it's the same thing with humans. We're eating ding dongs and, all these things that they're selling us in all the fast food places. It would never existed too much in the past. And so it's the availability of these poisons that are just really sending us to the current day doctors who don't know how to fix us.
So the first doctor that I found was Dr. Westman. And Dr. Westman, so I did watch that famous white coat video where he tells you what to eat and like and how to understand this diet. But I mean I didn't necessarily follow what he said to eat because he named a bunch of foods I'd never heard of before.
Ah,
Um, I'm from the Caribbean, so
okay.
I did my adjustments. Actually, my dad is a chef. So I have
Wow.
the positive of having him to be able to say, "Oh, if this is what you're trying to accomplish, these are the foods that you would be able to eat." And so we had that conversation and I started on my path. And then after him, I found Dr. Berg and Dr. Fung. So those were the first three, I would say. And I liked Dr. Berg and Dr. Fung because I do have a science background, although like I liked their explanations because they were going into the understanding and I could follow like what they were telling me and it made sense to me what they were saying about how the human body works, da da da. And I really did love their original, like their especially their early work. Oh, like the detail they used to go into was exciting for me. And then of course I found a bunch of other people after that.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Dr. Fung, I have a couple of quotes from him in the book. I have this one chapter on PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and how to reverse it in 12 weeks. And then Dr. Berg, I've known for a while. In fact, he called me out of the blue. I don't know, it was about a year or so ago. And because of the success of the book, he wanted to invite me on to the Maha team, right? The social media Maha thing. And I thought, hey, sure, And with RFK Jr. and all that. And listen, just so for your audience, health is not political. There's no doctor or emergency room that's going to ask if you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever. That has nothing to do with it. So just kind of, I don't know where anybody is on that spectrum, but, we just want to get all the crap out of the foods that we're feeding to the kids and ourselves so that we can, he's pushing right now for doctors to get more education on nutrition into the medical schools. So he's doing a great job with all that. I don't know everything that he's up to, but anyway, so that's how I know those two guys. And you're so right, because they do the research. You can see these videos that Berg does, it's like, man, he's really into the research, takes the deep dive, that kind of thing.
And I love that because for the people who are going to take the time to watch the entire video, by the time they get to the end, they at least have an understanding of like what is most important and potentially questions to ask their doctors. And I think that's the biggest thing with that Dr. Fung and Dr. Berg and even Barry Eckberg. There's so many of them. Lustig. They're giving you Bickman. They're giving you all the information that you need so that you can have a real conversation with your doctor and like at least start to understand what if we're on the same page.
Yeah, no, and Dr. Berg has a team behind him. See, he does the research and he speaks his script to the camera and everything. And then he's got this team that puts this amazing B-roll. B-roll is like where if he talks about exercise, you'll then see a couple jogging on the beach or so there's so much of the B-roll that really get the idea. Oh yeah, and it's makes it much easier to ingest for the average person. So yeah, send people to all those. Those are our heroes. So
This was an amazing conversation. I'm so happy that you were able to come and like talk to my audience because I think this kind of information isn't something that we're easily going to learn. And a book like this that just very plainly states like what's what so that you can have a conversation with your doctor and take better actions for your own health. I think this is amazing.
well, thank you. I really appreciate that, Violet. And just so everybody knows, the name of the book is Unholy Trinity. Subtitle: How Carbs, Sugar, and Oils Make Us Fat, Sick, and Addicted, and How to Escape Their Grip.
How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way to just go to my website, danieltrevor.com. There's a lot of information in there. They can get on my mailing list. Once a week, I send out a newsletter, and it's free. I'm not selling anything. I don't have supplements or powders or t-shirts or anything. This is not a money motivated mission for me. They can check out all the different blood tests, and there's a bunch of videos up there. So go there, get on the list, and then it's all about topics that are in the book, but more bite size, right? In the weekly newsletter. So yeah, do that. And if an audio book is better for them, they can also get that as well.
Actually, I have both. I bought the audiobook and
Ah,
I'm very happy that you sent me this book.
ah,
So
great.
that's really cool. I like to go through them together.
Wonderful.
Wellness Warrior. The most important thing that I want you to pay attention to that Daniel just explained to us is that he passed every test his doctor gave to him and still had a heart attack. Not because he wasn't eating healthy according to them, because nobody was testing him for the right stuff. And nobody explained to him what was actually driving the problem inside his body. As a matter of fact, he didn't even know he had a problem. And that is all of our story. We are exhausted from trying. We don't feel like ourselves anymore. And all of this because we don't have all the information. Daniel didn't wait to be saved. He learned about how his body works, and then he took decisions that improved his health. And those decisions changed everything for him. You can make the same decision today. So I want you to stop waiting. Now that you understand what is actually happening in your body, it's time to work on consistently eating on plan. That's exactly what we work on in my coaching program. We work together on understanding why your body responds the way it does to food, rebuilding your relationship with eating in a way that works with your biology, and building the mental foundation that it takes to make eating healthy a permanent way of life. The link to work with me is in the description below. And don't forget to grab Daniel's book, The Unholy Trinity. I have the link below. It really is worth every page. So until we meet again, this is the video that you want to watch next.